The wind across the Karakum Desert carries no mercy, only the stinging grit of sand and the distant rhythmic thunder of 10,000 hooves. In the history of empires, there are wars fought for territory, for resources, and for glory. But there are other campaigns, shadow campaigns, fought for silence. This is a story about the latter. It is 1220 AD, and the most powerful military machine the world has ever known has turned its gaze away from the fortified cities and the burning fields to focus on a single, moving target: a caravan, a royal procession fleeing into the grey mist of the Caspian coast. Inside were not soldiers, but the living symbols of a dying dynasty. They were fleeing because they knew the truth that the rest of the world was only just beginning to understand. The Mongol Empire did not just defeat its enemies, it dismantled them.
It pulled them apart, root and stem, until nothing remained but the memory of their error. Among the refugees was a woman whose bloodline made her a target of the highest priority. She was a princess of the Khwarazmian Empire, a woman raised in the silk-draped halls of Samarkand, now reduced to a fugitive in the wasteland. She carried with her the legitimacy of a fallen king, and for that she was hunted. Not merely chased, but stalked with an investigative precision that spanned hundreds of miles. The archives of the past are filled with battles we can see and dates we can memorize. But at Dark Inquest History, we look for the moments that happen in the margins, the quiet dismantling of lives that history tries to forget.
This video explores why the Mongols hunted down this princess until her final breath. To understand the severity of this manhunt, one must first understand the scale of the world she lost. Before the smoke rose over the horizon, the Khwarazmian Empire was the titan of the Islamic world. It stretched across modern-day Iran, Uzbekistan, and Turkmenistan. It was a civilization of immense wealth, intellectual prowess, and seemingly unshakable military might. The cities of Bukhara and Urgench were jewels of architecture and culture, places where the morning sun glinted off turquoise tiles and the markets overflowed with goods from the Silk Road. It was a society built on hierarchy, on deep-seated traditions, and on the absolute authority of the Shah.
At the pinnacle of this structure sat the royal family. The women of the court, the princesses and the queen mother, lived in a sphere of elevated isolation. They were the political currency of the empire, their marriages sealing alliances, their bloodline guaranteeing the succession. They were protected by walls, by guards, and by the sheer assumption of invulnerability. No one looked the Shah in the eye, and certainly no one threatened the sanctity of his household. They believed they were the center of the world. But on the eastern horizon, the tectonic plates of history were shifting. Genghis Khan had united the tribes of the Mongolian steppe and was looking outward. Initially, he sought trade.
He sent a caravan to the Khwarazmian city of Otrar, a gesture of diplomatic opening. The governor of that city, arrogant and suspicious, seized the goods and executed the merchants. It was a violation of the most ancient laws of the steppe, the safety of ambassadors and the sanctity of guests. When Genghis Khan sent envoys to demand justice, the Shah executed them too. This was not a declaration of war. It was a signing of a death warrant for an entire civilization. The Mongol response was not a raid, it was a total systemic liquidation. The armies that swept out of the east were unlike anything the Khwarazmian defenders had ever seen. They moved with a speed that defied logic, coordinating across vast distances with smoke signals and arrow riders.
They did not just attack armies, they attacked the psychology of the population. Fear was their vanguard. As the great cities of the empire began to fall, a panic took hold of the royal court. The Shah, the man who believed himself the shadow of God on earth, realized too late that his armies could not stop the tide. He fled, leaving his people to the fire. But the Mongols were not just interested in the Shah. They were interested in the structure of his power. and that structure relied on his family. The order given to the Mongol generals, Jebe and Subutai, was specific. They were to cut the head off the snake, but they were also to secure the lineage. The hunt for the royal women began. This was not a chaotic pursuit. It was a calculated operation.
The Mongols understood that as long as the royal heirs remained free, the Khwarazmian resistance could rally. A princess was not just a woman in this context. She was a political asset, a potential banner for rebellion, and a vessel for the future. To control the empire, they had to control her. The princess and her entourage, led by the formidable Queen Mother Turkin Khatun, fled the capital of Urgench before the siege lines could close. They took with them the crown jewels, the treasury, and the false hope that distance could save them. They moved west, pushing their horses to the breaking point, crossing the inhospitable terrain toward the fortresses of the Mazandaran province. Imagine the psychological state of this journey. These were women who had spent their entire lives in the secluded luxury of the harem, where their every need was anticipated, where their feet rarely touched the bare earth. Now they were exposed to the elements, sleeping in rough tents, looking over their shoulders at every shadow. The reports reaching them were fragmented and terrifying. City after city was being erased. The Mongols were not just occupying territory, they were altering the demographics of the region. The princess would have watched the horizon with a growing sense of dread. The Mongol intelligence network was terrifyingly efficient. Spies and collaborators were everywhere. The empire she knew was dissolving, the loyalties of governors and generals evaporating as the inevitability of the Mongol victory became clear.
She was running through a landscape that was turning hostile, where every village was a potential trap. The pursuit was relentless. Jebe and Subutai, the two greatest dogs of war in the Mongol army, were tracking them. They did not rest. They utilized the remount system, changing horses constantly to maintain a pace that no standard army could match. They cut off escape routes, burned bridges, and secured water sources. They were herding the royal refugees, steering them toward a dead end. The royal party finally sought refuge in the Fortress of Ilal. It was a stronghold built high in the Alborz Mountains, designed to withstand sieges that could last for years. The walls were thick stone, the approaches steep and narrow.
It looked impregnable. Here, the princess and her family thought they could wait out the storm. They believed the Mongols, accustomed to the open plains, would fail against the vertical warfare of the mountains. They were wrong. The Mongols arrived at the foot of the mountain, not with the intention of storming the walls, but with the patience of a predator. They surrounded the fortress, cutting it off from the world. But they did not need to fight the stone. They fought the environment. In a twist of cruel fate, the Fortress of Ilal, known for its deep cisterns and water reserves, faced a catastrophic failure. Some accounts suggest a drought, others a breakage in the containment. The water supply, which should have lasted months, evaporated in weeks.
The thirst began. Inside the walls, the conditions deteriorated rapidly. The princess, who had once bathed in rosewater, was now rationing muddy dregs. The social hierarchy collapsed under the weight of biological necessity. Thirst is a terrible equalizer. It strips away dignity and leaves only the primal urge to survive. The defenders watched the Mongols below, who simply waited. There were no assaults, no glorious battles on the ramparts, just the slow, suffocating pressure of deprivation. The surrender was inevitable. The gates were opened, not by force, but by desperation. The royal women, the Queen Mother, the princess, and the children walked out of the fortress and into the hands of the people who had hunted them across the world.
This is the moment where the narrative shifts from a war story to something darker, something more administrative and chilling. In many historical conquests, the capture of royalty meant immediate execution or public display. The Mongols had a different methodology. They did not want martyrs. They wanted to absorb the power of the conquered. The men of the royal family, the young princes who could one day wield a sword, were separated. Their fate was swift and final.
They were eliminated to ensure no male heir could ever claim the throne of Khwarazm. The line was severed. But for the women, the princess included, the fate was more complex. They were not executed, they were distributed. The princess was sent east, thousands of miles away from her homeland, to the Mongol capital.
She was stripped of her titles, her jewels, and her agency. But the cruelty was not in the physical hardship alone. It was in the erasure of her identity. She was given to a Mongol leader, forced into a marriage that served to dilute her royal blood. This was a common Mongol strategy, to take the women of conquered dynasties and integrate them into the Mongol elite, thereby legitimizing their own rule while ensuring the old dynasty ceased to exist as an independent entity. She lived the rest of her days in the shadow of the people who destroyed her world. She had to learn their language, adopt their customs, and bear children who would grow up not as Khwarazmian royalty, but as Mongols. The hunt did not end with her capture. It ended with the total assimilation of her existence.
She was hunted until every trace of the princess she once was had been extinguished. Her final breath was not taken on a battlefield, but likely in a tent or a palace far from home, surrounded by the very culture that had consumed her own. The empire of Khwarazm was gone, its cities leveled, its libraries burned, its irrigation canals destroyed, and the princess, the last living vessel of that memory, was absorbed into the silence of history. It is a stark reminder of how empires maintain control. It is not always through the sword. Sometimes, the most effective tool of oppression is the denial of a future. The Mongols understood that to truly conquer a people, you must own their history and you must own their blood.
The tragedy of the Khwarazmian princess is not just in her suffering, but in the efficiency of her erasure. She was a witness to the death of her civilization, and then she was forced to become part of the machine that killed it. Subscribe to Dark Inquest History. We find the stories buried beneath the victory monuments.